Jake Miller wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pushed through the crowded slave market on Station Terminus 9. The air stank of too many species crammed into one place, a mix of sulfur, ammonia, and something that smelled like rotting fruit. He needed help with his mining operation, and buying contracted labor was the only option he could afford on his tight budget. Problem was, nobody took him seriously. Jake was human, and humans were practically invisible in the galactic community. They'd only joined the wider universe about 30 years ago, and most aliens saw them as primitives who barely understood jump drive technology. The fancy dealers with their expensive merchandise didn't even look his way. They were too busy showing off their prized workers to wealthy customers from the core worlds. Jake wandered deeper into the market, past rows of cages and holding pens. He saw all kinds of beings, some with scales, others with tentacles, a few that looked like walking crystals. Most looked healthy enough, standing straight and showing off their skills to potential buyers. Those weren't for someone like Jake. He needed the bargain bin, the clearance section where desperate dealers sold off their problem cases. That's when he heard it, a low rumbling sound that vibrated through the metal floor. It came from the darkest corner of the market, where even the dim station lights barely reached. Jake's curiosity got the better of him and he walked toward the sound. The cage was massive, easily 10 meters wide and just as tall. Inside was what looked like a mountain of dirty, matted fur. At first, Jake thought it might be dead, but then he saw it breathe, a slow, painful rise and fall that spoke of exhaustion beyond anything Jake had ever seen. "You interested in that one human?" a clicking voice asked. Jake turned to see a Crescian dealer, an insectoid creature with too many legs and eyes that glittered like black glass. The dealer's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "I warn you, it's more trouble than it's worth." "What is it?" Jake asked, stepping closer to the cage. "Avoid Urson," the dealer said, and there was something like fear in those clicking words. "Name's Brutus. Last of his kind or close enough. You're too young to remember, human, but 340 years ago, the Ursons were the most feared warriors in 17 star systems. They could tear through starship hulls with their bare claws. One Urson could take down 100 soldiers without breaking a sweat." Jake looked at the creature in the cage. It was hard to imagine this broken thing being dangerous to anyone. "What happened to them?" The dealer shrugged, a complicated gesture with so many limbs. "They lost a war. Refused to surrender even when beaten, so the Concordants decided to make examples of them. Enslaved the whole species, broke them down one by one. This one's been passed around for centuries. Every owner tries to use him as a fighter or a guard, but he's too far gone. The suppressors fried most of his spirit decades ago." Jake could see the device now, a metal collar around the creature's neck with wires that disappeared into the thick fur. Neural suppressors were illegal on human worlds, considered torture devices. But out here in the wider galaxy, they were just another tool for controlling property. "How much?" Jake asked quietly. The Crescian's mandibles clicked rapidly. "You can't be serious, human. Look at him. He eats more in a week than you probably make in a month. He's useless for work, too broken for fighting. I'm only keeping him because the disposal fees are too high." "I asked how much," Jake repeated, his voice firm. The dealer named a price. It was low, incredibly low for a living being, but it was still everything Jake had saved over the past 2 years. It was his emergency fund, his backup plan, his safety net. Without it, one bad accident or broken ship part could ruin him completely. Jake looked at the creature called Brutus. Those eyes, barely visible through the matted fur, held something Jake recognized. It was the same look he'd seen in mirrors back on Earth, during the hard times before he'd escaped to space. The look of someone who'd given up hope. "I'll take him," Jake said. The Crescian dealer froze. "You're joking." "I don't joke about business," Jake replied, pulling out his credit chip. "Transfer the ownership papers. All of them. I want him legally freed from Concordance indenture laws." "Freed?" The dealer's laughter sounded like grinding metal. "Human, you can't free a Void Urson. The Concordance would have your ship impounded within a day. Best I can do is transfer ownership to you." "Then do that," Jake said. "We'll figure out the rest later." As Jake finalized the transaction, he heard laughter from nearby buyers. A group of well-dressed merchants from the core worlds were pointing at him, their translator devices turning their mockery into standard. "Look at the human. Spending his last credits on garbage. These primitives understand nothing about proper business." Jake ignored them. He'd been underestimated his whole life. What was one more time? He approached the cage as the dealer deactivated the lock. Inside, Brutus hadn't moved. Maybe he didn't care anymore who owned him. Maybe he couldn't tell the difference between one master and another after 340 years. But Jake had a feeling that was about to change. Getting Brutus onto the long shot had been the easy part. The hard part was what came next. Jake stood in his cargo bay, looking at the neural suppressor embedded in Brutus's skull. The device had been there for so long that fur and scar tissue had grown around it. Medical databases showed him exactly how dangerous this would be. One wrong move and he could kill Brutus instantly, or worse, leave him brain damaged. Jake wasn't a doctor. He was a mechanic who fixed ships and mining equipment. But he'd watched every tutorial he could download, studied every diagram of Ursan anatomy he could find. His hands shook as he laid out his tools on a clean cloth. This was insane. He should take Brutus to a proper medical facility. Except no medical facility would help. The moment they scanned Brutus's ownership chip, they'd report Jake to the Concordance authorities. And even if they didn't, the cost of proper surgery would be 10 times what Jake had paid for Brutus in the first place. "All right, big guy," Jake said, his voice steadier than he felt. "This is going to hurt. I'm sorry about that. But I promise I'll be as careful as I can." Brutus didn't respond. He just lay there on the cargo bay floor, breathing slowly. Jake wondered if the Ursan even understood what was about to happen, or if he'd been broken so badly that he didn't care anymore. Jake started with the external connections first, carefully cutting away the wires that ran from the collar into Brutus's neck. Each wire sparked as he disconnected it, and Brutus's body would twitch. But the Ursan never made a sound, never tried to pull away. That frightened Jake more than anything. What kind of suffering did you have to endure to not even flinch at pain? The collar came off first, clattering to the metal floor with a heavy thud. That was the easy part done. Now came the real danger, the neural implants buried deep in Brutus's skull. Jake had to physically remove them, which meant cutting through thick fur and old scar tissue. He worked for hours, sweat pouring down his face. The ship's medical scanner guided his hands, showing him where each implant sat in relation to vital brain tissue. One slip, one moment of carelessness, and he'd kill the creature he was trying to save. His back ached from bending over. His eyes burned from staring at the scanner screen. But he didn't stop. Finally, after what felt like forever, Jake extracted the last implant. It was an ugly piece of technology, covered in dried blood and surrounded by damaged tissue. He dropped it on the floor next to the others and stepped back, exhausted. For a long moment, nothing happened. Brutus just lay there, motionless. Jake's heart sank. Had he done something wrong? Had the suppressors been installed so long that removing them caused permanent damage? Then Brutus moved. It started with a twitch in one massive paw. Then his breathing changed, becoming deeper, stronger. His eyes opened fully for the first time, and Jake saw they were a brilliant amber color, like firelight. The Ursan's muscles tensed, and suddenly he was rising to his feet. The long shot wasn't a big ship. The cargo bay ceiling was barely high enough for Jake to stand upright with his arms raised. Brutus, at his full height of 4 meters, made the space feel tiny. His head nearly touched the ceiling. His shoulders were wider than Jake's entire body. When he spread his arms, his claws scraped against both walls. The ship actually shook from Brutus's weight shifting. Equipment rattled on shelves. Jake's coffee mug fell off a workbench and shattered on the floor. Any sane person would have run. Any sane person would have grabbed a weapon or hit the emergency lockdown. Jake just stood there looking up at the massive Ursan and said calmly, "You're free. I expect nothing from you." Brutus stared down at him. Those amber eyes were fully aware now, fully intelligent. This wasn't the broken creature from the cage. This was a warrior who'd been forcibly asleep for centuries and he'd just woken up. "Free," Brutus repeated. His voice was like rocks grinding together, rusty from disuse. The translator implant in his throat struggled to convert his words to standard. "Nothing is free. What do you want from me?" "I want you to be free," Jake said simply. "That's all." "Lies." Brutus took a step forward and Jake could feel the floor vibrate. "Everyone wants something. You paid for me. I am property. So what is my purpose? Fighting? Killing? Guarding your ship?" "Your purpose is whatever you decide it is," Jake replied. He was scared, he'd be stupid not to be, but he kept his voice steady. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what I'm doing here. I saw you in that cage and I couldn't just walk away. Maybe that makes me an idiot. Probably does, considering I spent my life savings on you. But I didn't buy you to use you. I bought you to free you." Brutus was silent for a long moment. His massive head tilted to one side, studying Jake like he was some kind of puzzle. "This is a trick," Brutus finally said. "A test. You want to see if I'll rebel if I still have fight in me so you can punish me? No trick, Jake said. He gestured around the cargo bay. Look, I've got food in the storage locker over there. Medicine in the cabinet. There's a spare cabin down the hall. It's small but it's got a bed and privacy. It's yours if you want it. Or you can leave. The airlock controls are right there. I won't stop you. Brutus looked at the airlock then back at Jake. If I leave, where would I go? My people are gone. My world is ashes. I have nothing. Then stay, Jake offered. Not as property. I don't know. A roommate? A friend? Whatever you want to be. No strings attached. You're free to leave whenever you want. The confusion on Brutus's face was almost painful to watch. After 340 years of slavery, the concept of freedom without cost seemed impossible for him to grasp. He kept waiting for the trap, for the cruelty, for the inevitable betrayal. Instead, Jake just opened the storage locker and started pulling out food rations. You must be starving. Here, try these. They're not great, but they're better than the slop they feed slaves in the markets. Brutus watched, suspicious and confused, as this strange human offered him food, medicine, and kindness. Finally he spoke. I will stay. For now. Only to understand what game you are playing. Jake smiled tiredly. Fair enough. Welcome aboard the Longshot, Brutus. The first few days were awkward. Brutus spent most of his time in the cargo bay, watching Jake work on the ship's systems. He didn't talk much, just observed with those sharp amber eyes. Jake gave him space, figuring the Urson needed time to adjust to freedom after centuries of chains. On the fourth day, Jake was heading out to the asteroid belt for mining work. He was suiting up when Brutus appeared in the airlock chamber. I'm coming with you, Brutus said. Jake looked up, surprised. You don't have to. I mean, you're not my employee or anything. I know, Brutus replied. But I'm tired of sitting around. Show me what you do. So Jake taught him. He showed Brutus how to operate the mining lasers, how to identify valuable ore deposits, how to use the collection drones. Brutus learned fast, faster than Jake expected. Within a week, the Urson was handling half the work on his own. What surprised Jake most was how he handled the money. At the end of the first week, he transferred half the profits into a new account he'd created for Brutus. Brutus stared at the account balance on his datapad. What is this? Your share, Jake said like it was obvious. We're partners. 50-50 split. Partners? Brutus repeated slowly, testing the word. I've never been a partner before. Only property. Only slave. Well, you're not property anymore, Jake said firmly. You do half the work, you get half the pay. That's how partnerships work. Something changed in Brutus after that. He started talking more, asking questions about human culture and Earth. He told Jake stories about the Urson homeworld, about forests so tall their tops disappeared into the clouds, about hunts that lasted for weeks. His voice would get softer when he talked about the past, like he was remembering something precious and painful at the same time. They fell into a comfortable routine. Wake up, have breakfast together, head out to the asteroids, work until exhaustion, come back and share dinner. It wasn't much, but it was honest work, and for the first time in longer than Jake could remember, he didn't feel alone in the universe. Then the pirates showed up. Jake was in the middle of extracting a particularly rich platinum deposit when his scanner started screaming warnings. 3 ships dropping out of jump space, fast attack raiders by the look of them. He barely had time to curse before they were broadcasting on all channels. Attention mining vessel. You're in our territory. Surrender your cargo and we'll let you live. Resist and we'll blow you apart. Jake's hands tightened on the controls. He'd heard about these pirates, a gang that preyed on independent miners in the outer belt. They usually traveled in packs and didn't leave witnesses. His ship wasn't armed, just a beat-up cargo hauler with mining equipment. Against 3 raiders he didn't stand a chance. The smart move was to surrender. Give them the cargo, take the loss, live to mine another day. But Jake had never been good at making smart moves. Brutus, he said into the comm, get to the airlock. I'm coming back to the ship. We've got company. I see them, Brutus's voice crackled back. 3 ships. Armed. We should run. Can't run, Jake said, already maneuvering back toward the long shot. They're blocking our jump coordinates. We'd be dead before we could calculate a new route. He docked fast and sloppy, the ship shuddering from the impact. Jake ran through the corridors, grabbing anything that could be used as a weapon. A plasma welding torch. Mining explosives. A cargo hook. It wasn't much, but it was what he had. Brutus was waiting in the cargo bay. This is insane. You're going to fight them? I'm going to try, Jake said, checking the torch's fuel cell. Look, you don't have to be part of this. Hide in your cabin. They don't know you're here. I'll handle it. Brutus stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You're serious? You actually intend to fight 3 armed raiders with a welding torch? You got a better idea? Jake asked, moving toward the airlock. The first pirate came through the outer door cocky and careless. He probably expected a terrified miner begging for mercy. Instead, he got Jake swinging a cargo hook into his helmet. The pirate stumbled back and Jake hit him with the plasma torch, the superheated beam cutting through armor plating. The second pirate was smarter. He came in firing plasma bolts sizzling past Jake's head. Jake dove behind a container and threw a mining charge. The explosion rocked the cargo bay and the pirate went down. Then the third one appeared, and this one had heavier armor and a bigger gun. Jake was out of explosives. His torch was nearly empty. He was about to die and he knew it. That's when Brutus moved. The Urson exploded from the shadows like a force of nature. 4 meters of muscle and fury crashed into the pirate with a roar that shook the ship's hull. Claws that could tear through starship metal made short work of armor plating. The pirate didn't even have time to scream. The remaining pirates on their ships must have seen what happened, because they suddenly decided this mining claim wasn't worth dying for. Their engines flared and they jumped away, abandoning their dead companions. Jake sat down hard on the deck, his heart pounding. Well, that was something. Brutus looked at him, still breathing hard from the fight. You didn't run. You didn't hide behind me. You fought. Course I fought, Jake said. This is my ship. My claim. Nobody takes what's mine without a fight. Even when fighting means dying? Especially then, Jake replied. What's the point of being free if you roll over the moment someone threatens you? Brutus was quiet for a long moment. Then he sat down next to Jake, the deck creaking under his weight. I was a war chief once. Did I tell you that? You mentioned it, Jake said. My people fought a war against the Concordants. We lost. They demanded we surrender, that we become part of their system, follow their rules. We refused. So they decided to make examples of us. Brutus's voice was heavy with old pain. They enslaved us, broke us, scattered us across the galaxy. I was captured because an allied species betrayed us. Sold our positions for better trade deals. That's awful, Jake said quietly. What about your people? Brutus asked. Do humans have a history of war? Jake laughed bitterly. Oh yeah, we've got history. We fought each other for thousands of years. We enslaved each other, oppressed each other, did terrible things. It's only been about 200 years since we finally figured out that maybe treating each other like people was a good idea. But you did figure it out, Brutus said. Eventually. After a lot of pain and suffering and people fighting for what was right. Jake looked up at the Urson. That's why I couldn't leave you in that cage. My ancestors fought and died for freedom. Who am I to walk past someone in chains? Brutus nodded slowly. You're strange, Jake Miller. Strange and stupid and brave. I'll take that as a compliment, Jake said with a grin. And for the first time since they'd met, Brutus smiled back. The trouble started 3 weeks after the pirate incident. Jake was running a routine supply pickup at a trading station when the dock master pulled him aside, looking nervous. You need to leave, the dock master whispered. Right now. There's been chatter on the official channels. The Concordance knows about your Urson. Jake's blood ran cold. How? Someone from the slave market talked. Word got out that a human freed a void Urson and removed his neural suppressor. That's a serious violation of about 50 different laws. The dock master glanced around nervously. They're sending enforcement ships. You've got maybe an hour before they arrive. Jake ran back to the long shot. He found Brutus in the cargo bay organizing mining equipment. We need to go. Now. What's wrong? Brutus asked, seeing Jake's expression. The Concordance knows about you. They're coming. Brutus's face hardened. Then I'll turn myself in. No reason for you to suffer because of me. Are you insane? Jake snapped. After everything, you think I'm just going to hand you over? Jake, they'll destroy you. Take your ship, throw you in prison, ruin your life. All because of me. Yeah, well, that's my choice to make, Jake shot back. He was already firing up the engines, calculating jump coordinates. Now sit down and hold on. They made it about 3 hours before the Concordance caught up. Jake's scanner lit up with contacts. Not 1 or 2 ships, but a whole enforcement fleet. Cruisers, destroyers, and a command carrier. They weren't taking chances with a freed void Urson. The communications channel crackled to life. Unregistered vessel Longshot, this is Concordance Enforcement Captain Velk. You are harboring illegal property. Surrender the Urson designated Brutus immediately or we will take him by force. Jake looked at Brutus. The Urson's expression was resigned, like he'd expected this all along. Like he'd known freedom couldn't last. Something in Jake snapped. He opened a broadcast channel, not just to the Concordance ships but to every frequency he could access. Every ship in the sector, every station, every listening post. He wanted everyone to hear this. This is Jake Miller, captain of the Longshot. I'm broadcasting to anyone who's listening. The Concordance is here to enslave my friend. They call it property retrieval. I call it what it is, slavery. They want me to hand over a sentient being like he's a piece of furniture. Cease this transmission immediately, Captain Velk's voice cut in. Jake ignored him. Brutus was a prisoner for 340 years. Tortured, broken, treated worse than an animal. I freed him because it was the right thing to do. And now they want to put him back in chains. Well, I've got a message for the Concordance. Come and take him. I dare you. You're insane, human, Velk replied. You have one mining ship against an entire fleet. Stand down or we will open fire. Then fire, Jake said calmly. Because I'm not giving him up. Brutus grabbed Jake's shoulder. What are you doing? They'll kill us both. Maybe, Jake said. But at least we'll die free. That's more than most beings get in this galaxy. The Concordance fleet moved into attack formation. Jake readied what few defenses the Longshot had. Mining lasers that couldn't punch through military shields, cargo containers he could eject as obstacles. It was pathetic against a real military force, but he'd make them work for it. The first shots came. Plasma bolts streaked across space. Jake dodged desperately, his ship groaning under the strain. One blast clipped their rear shields and alarms screamed through the cockpit. Another few hits and they'd be done. Then something impossible happened. New contacts appeared on the scanner. Not Concordance ships. These were smaller, older, a ragtag collection of freighters, transports, and salvage vessels. Dozens of them dropping out of jump space all around the battlefield. A new voice came over the comm channel, rough and hesitant. Longshot, this is the freighter Dawn's Hope. We heard your broadcast. We're here to help. More voices joined in. This is cargo hauler Mercy. We stand with you. Transport ship Freedom's call. Nobody goes back in chains. Not today. Jake stared at his scanner in disbelief. These were freed slaves, former property from a dozen different species. They'd heard his defiance and decided to answer. Then something even more miraculous happened. 12 massive contacts appeared, much larger than the other ships. Jake's scanner identified them as Urson warcruisers, ancient vessels from before the Concordance had crushed the Urson civilization. Brutus made a sound like a strangled gasp. That's impossible. Those are my people's ships. They were all destroyed. Brutus, a deep voice rumbled over the comm, brother. Is that really you? Tears ran down Brutus's face, the first time Jake had seen the massive warrior cry. Karn? Karn, I thought you were dead. I thought all of you were dead. We've been hiding, brother. Scattered across the void, pretending to be broken, waiting for a reason to stand up again. And then we heard this human's words. We heard him call the Concordance what they really are. We heard him choose death over surrender. More Urson voices joined in, 12 warriors that Brutus had believed lost forever. They'd survived by hiding, by pretending to be broken slaves while secretly keeping their old warships hidden. And now they were emerging from the shadows, inspired by one stubborn human who refused to back down. Captain Velk's voice came back on the channel and for the first time he sounded uncertain. This is illegal. You're all in violation of Concordance law. Stand down immediately. No, Jake said simply. Not today. Not ever again. The ragtag fleet held formation around the Longshot. Freed slaves who'd spent lifetimes in chains, now choosing to fight rather than watch someone else lose their freedom. Void Ursons who'd hidden for centuries, now willing to reveal themselves for this moment. The Concordance fleet could have destroyed them all. They had the firepower, the training, the numbers. But as the standoff continued, something unexpected happened. Other ships started arriving, not to fight but to watch. News ships, independent traders, even some Concordance civilian vessels. Jake's broadcast had been heard across the sector, and now everyone was watching to see what would happen. The galaxy was watching. And for the first time in a very long time, the Concordance hesitated. The standoff lasted for 6 hours. The Concordance fleet held position, weapons charged but not firing. Jake's ragtag alliance of freed slaves and Urson warcruisers held their ground, refusing to back down. and the whole galaxy watched through news feeds and live broadcast. Captain Velk tried negotiations. He tried threats. He tried promising amnesty if Jake just surrendered Brutus peacefully. Jake's answer never changed: no. Then the political pressure started building. Species that had stayed quiet about concordance indenture laws for centuries suddenly found their voices. The images of a single human standing against an entire fleet, willing to die rather than return his friend to slavery, struck something deep in the galactic consciousness. It was embarrassing. One primitive human had more moral clarity than their entire civilization. The breaking point came when the Terran Alliance, humanity's government, issued an official statement. They didn't have much military power compared to the Concordance, but they made their position crystal clear. Any action taken against Jake Miller will be considered an act of war against Earth and all her colonies. It was a bluff. Earth couldn't actually win a war against the Concordance. But it didn't matter. The Concordance was already dealing with a public relations nightmare. Adding a war with an emerging species to the mix would be political suicide. 12 hours after the standoff began, the Concordance blinked first. "This matter will be reviewed by the Galactic Council," Captain Velk announced stiffly. "All parties are to stand down pending investigation." It wasn't a victory, not yet. But it was enough. The Concordance fleet jumped away and Jake finally allowed himself to breathe. What happened next took months, but Jake had started something that couldn't be stopped. His broadcast had gone viral across hundreds of star systems. Freed slaves started speaking out about their treatment. Species that had suffered under legal indenture began demanding change. The pressure became too much. 6 months after the standoff, the Galactic Council abolished indenture servitude in all its forms. They recognized sapient rights for all intelligent species, regardless of origin or history. It wasn't perfect. Enforcement would take years and some systems would resist, but it was a start. The Void Ursans held a ceremony aboard Karn's flagship. All 12 surviving war chiefs gathered, along with Jake and Brutus. Jake felt tiny surrounded by these massive warriors, each one a legend from a forgotten age. Karn, the eldest, stepped forward. His fur was streaked with white and old scars covered his arms. "Jake Miller. You are not Ursan. You were not born under our 3 moons. You did not hunt in our endless forests. But you have shown courage that would honor any warrior of our people." The other Ursans began a low, rhythmic chant in their native language. The sound made Jake's chest vibrate. "We name you first, friend," Karn continued. "An honor never given to an outsider in 10,000 years of Ursan history. You are one of us now, in spirit if not in blood." Before Jake could respond, Brutus stepped forward. "I claim this human as shield brother. By the old laws, by the warrior's code, I bind my life to his." The other Ursans roared their approval, a sound that shook the ship's bulkheads. Jake later learned that shield brothers was the highest bond in Ursan culture, closer than family, deeper than friendship. It meant they would stand together until death. Life after that was different but also somehow the same. Jake went back to mining asteroids because that's what he knew how to do. But now he wasn't alone. Brutus stayed with him, of course. But 3 other Ursans also asked to join, warriors who'd spent centuries hiding and wanted to do something meaningful with their freedom. They formed a company, Unlikely Companions LLC. The name was Jake's idea, and it made Brutus laugh, that deep, rumbling laugh that Jake had come to love. They took jobs that other companies wouldn't touch. Dangerous salvage operations, security for ships traveling through pirate territory, rescue missions in unstable systems. They became legends in their own right. Stories spread about the human and his Ursan companions who'd take any job, no matter how impossible it seemed. They didn't work cheap, but they never failed to deliver. 8 months after everything began, Jake and Brutus sat in the Longshot's cargo bay. The other Ursans had their own ships now, but Brutus had stayed on the original vessel. It was cramped for someone his size, but he insisted he liked it that way. Jake poured 2 glasses of whiskey, real Earth whiskey, expensive as hell out here in the outer territories. They'd just finished a job rescuing miners trapped in a collapsed asteroid tunnel. Good pay, successful mission, nobody died. A good day. "You know," Brutus said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, "I could leave any time. Build my own ship, start my own operation. Karn has offered me a position commanding one of the war cruisers." Jake's heart sank a little, but he kept his voice steady. "Yeah, you could. Is that what you want?" "No," Brutus said simply. "I'm staying here." "Why?" Jake asked. "Not that I'm complaining, but you've got better options than a beat-up mining ship and a stubborn human." Brutus looked at him with those amber eyes that had seen centuries of suffering. "I didn't stay because I owed you. I didn't stay because of honor or duty or any of that warrior nonsense. I stayed because you gave me something I thought was lost forever. What's that? Trust, Brutus said quietly. For 340 years, everyone I met wanted something from me. Wanted to use me, break me, control me. You were the first being in centuries who just wanted me to be free. Who saw me as a person, not a weapon or a slave or a monster. Jake felt his throat tighten. You gave me something too, you know? What's that? A friend who'd stand beside me against the entire galaxy, Jake said with a smile. Turns out that's worth more than all the credits in the universe. Brutus raised his glass. To unlikely companions. Jake clinked his glass against Brutus's. To outstanding friends. Outside the viewport, stars streaked past as the long shot jumped to their next job. 2 outcasts from underestimated species, proving that the strongest bonds aren't forged by chains or obligation, but by choice and respect. In a universe that measured worth by power and profit, a human and an Urson had found something more valuable, genuine friendship. And that, Jake thought, was the greatest treasure of all.